So how to increase our saddle comfort at no extra cost? That's right, not a cent, not a penny. And how to do it is right under our noses. No matter which bike or bikes that you're riding, you can increase the saddle comfort. So whether it's the bike that you're currently riding at the moment, or maybe you got yourself a brand new bike and you want to set up the saddle in the right position, or maybe like me, you've got a new seat or two and you want to try them out. So to get them in the right position for maximum comfort. Well, we all know how to test a saddle's comfort. Go for a long ride. At the end, you'll soon know if your saddle is comfortable or not. However, let's take it 1 or 2 or 3 steps further than that. So what's our main aim? Is to be comfortable on our saddle while maintaining fluidity in riding style. Now, our bicycle is not a push bike. We don't stomp on the pedals as we ride. No, we have nice pedaling action. So that consists of pulling back, maybe kicking forward and pulling up a little bit. And when you've got that nice pedaling style, it looks smooth. Another one is waddling hips as you're trying to reach for the pedals on every pedal stroke. You don't want that either. So you need to have the right position on your bike as well as being comfortable on your saddle. Now, we're not going to go on about position on your bike. That's more bike fit. You probably already had a bike fit, or maybe you're comfortable with the way you are on your bike anyhow, but your seat could still be a bit of tweaking, or maybe you're putting a new seat on and you want to get that maximum comfort. The first thing to note is your current position on your bike, and that consists of 3 vital measurements. The height of your saddle, the distance from your saddle to your handlebars or the length, and the tilt of your saddle. Those 3 vital measurements. And if you don't already know them, get ready with pen and paper. So let's find your 3 vital measurements, and they all revolve around one point, the sit bone point. Do you know exactly where your sit bone point is? No? Okay, let's find out. Using aluminium alfoil, cover your seat and tuck it in all the way around the edges. Try and smooth off and take out as many wrinkles as you can. You won't be able to do it perfectly. Put on a pair of shorts made with a very thin material with no chamois in it, and put on your ordinary cycling shoes that you ride that bicycle with. Doing a short 500 metre ride, sit on your seat where you normally sit. When you get back off your seat, you should faintly see 2 oval-shaped impressions in the aluminium alfoil. One on the right side and one on the left. These are the impressions left by your sit bones. Run a texture around their approximate shapes and put a dot in the middle of each one. Now, chances are your seat's going to be black, so use a light coloured crayon or piece of chalk. Make sure it has a pointed end on it. Place it right on the centre's dot and make a mark right through to the cover of the saddle. You'll have 2 rough marks. Try and identify the centre of each dot and clean off around the edges. Hopefully your dots are fairly parallel on your seat. As a bonus, you can measure from dot to dot and you've got your sit bone width. Now you have your sit bone point, of which is central to taking your height and length. First of all, your height. So take the humble tape measure. We measure from the centre of your bottom bracket axle to the point on that saddle. There's a slight skew on the camera angle here, but the actual measurement is 775 millimeters. On paper, draw a shape of a bicycle frame with the seat post and seat and handlebars on there as well. So from the centre of the bottom bracket to the sit bone point was 775. The length is from your sit bone point to the centre of your handlebar. Make sure your handlebars are straight when you measure and not crooked. I'm just using a rubber band around the valve stem and around the frame. If you've got TPU tubes, don't break your valve stem off. So to the centre of the handlebar is 745 millimeters. So write your measurement on your illustration. Sit bone point to centre of handlebars. For me it was 745 millimetres. For your saddle tilt, use something very, very straight. This is a piece of squared aluminium tubing and it's very straight and it's not bendy. So this tubing will be slightly diagonally across your bike, and then you just take a ruler and measure from the top of your handlebar to the bottom of that rod. Sometimes it's hard to hold the ruler there and look at the same time and get an accurate to the millimetre measurement. So what you can do is use a pedal strap to hold it on, or you can use a rubber band. Now that'll free your hands up and your head so you can get a good accurate measurement. So my tilt on this bike is 130 millimetres. So 130 millimetres. Helpful too is to write down which bike you're measuring it on and even which saddle. Digital level meters are accurate, but making certain your bike is perfectly level when taking the measure isn't always possible. Here I would have already made a mistake. The rear wheel is off the ground by just over a centimetre. The front wheel is flat on the ground, so therefore it would have made an inaccurate tilt measurement. Even the ground level, is it actually level? This is why I'd suggest using the straight rod method. For those of you doing these measurements quite often, maybe you've got quite a few bikes or you're doing some for your friends as well, or maybe you've got a workshop, then you can make yourself one or two of these tools, much easier to use, and they look good too. So this one here is a tilt tool, and that one's the height and length measurement. I've done videos on how to make them, so go ahead. I'll just show you how to use them quickly. One end plugs into the crank preload cap, and the other end has a slider with a pointer, and this one has two pointers. Plug into your crank, adjust so that the pointer's on the sit bone point, and voila, you have your measurement. This same tool does the height and the length, making sure your handlebars stay straight. The end hooks over your handlebar and is adjustable to the centre line. And the other end is a slider, adjust it so that it's on the sit bone point. And there we go, 745 millimetres. The tilt measurement tool, from the bottom of the rod to where you read it, is a 10 millimetre difference, so I've written it on there. The other end hooks under the saddle. It's spring loaded and adjustable for different thicknesses of saddles. Adjuster in the middle for different length frames. And it lies diagonally across your bike. Push down or pull up the adjustable measure until it touches the top of your handlebar. You can tap it either way. And there's your reading. In this case it says 12, so 12 plus 10 is 13, so it's 130 millimeters tilt. This last tool, I haven't done a DIY video on how to make it because it would be about an hour long. It's just too complicated. But if I can make it, most of you should be able to. The bottom adjustable end plugs into the preload cap of your crank. At the joint, there's a pointer in the center, which you align with your sit bone point on your saddle. And the other end simply rests on top of your handlebars. Tighten up the central pivot, which will now hold the tool in that particular angle. Then simply plug it into the other bike that you want to copy those measurements to. I've set this bike up to be a little bit more racy, so the front end's a bit lower, as you can see, about 1 centimetre to 2 centimetres lower in the handlebars. If you're putting on a new seat, then take into account the seat rails. For instance, these ones are steel, so they're 7 millimetres round. However, this seat has carbon fibre rails. They're 7 millimetres wide by 9 millimetres deep. So I need to change the clamp to put 2 millimetres extra. So I have the little itty bitty clampy bits here. Says 7 by 9 on there, and so I need to swap them over in order to put this carbon fibre railed seat on. So if you are using a different rail, then make sure you get the appropriate clamps to suit. So now you've got your vital measurements on paper. Keep that somewhere safe for reference in the future. Now there's one more measurement you can take. You don't have to do this, but it is handy, and it's more sort of a bike fit sort of measurement. Just a plumb line. So I've got a piece of string with a fishing weight on there, and you dangle it down from that sit point, of course, and dangle it right down to almost touching the ground. Then you measure from the line to the centre of your bottom bracket spindle, and that gives you your seat setback. Now, the most important thing to remember about these measurements is if you adjust one of them, it'll affect the other two. So no matter which one you affect, say you change the height, that means your seat goes back more, which means your length has changed as well, which means you stretch forward more, which means your tilt's changed as well. So you see, each measurement can affect the other two. Don't overly worry about that, it's just something to keep in mind. So the first thing we're going to consider then is the height. Now the height is considered the most constant. It's the least likely one that you're going to adjust. So your height is pretty much going to be set. And there are some things that will affect the height. For instance, for me, I'm putting on a new saddle, and this saddle, if I measure it from the rail to the top of the seat and measure the old one, this is 13 millimeters shorter. So it's smaller than that one by 13 mil, which means I'll be lower by 13 millimeters. So the effective height is lower, and therefore I need to raise my seat post 13 millimeters so that that spot, the sit bone spot, can be in the same spot as my old seat. So consider the height from rail to the top of the seat if you're changing saddles. Other things that can change the height is your pedal to cleat stack. Now, chances are you're not going to change your pedals, and your cleats on your shoes are going to stay the same. You're going to use the same pedal system. However, if you did go to a different pedal system, that's something you may need to consider. The other thing is different shoes. Now, I personally ride with three different pairs of shoes, and I know this shoe is about 1.5 millimeter thicker in the sole than this shoe. So that'll put me higher on this shoe by 1.5 millimeters. Now, it doesn't sound much, but 1.5 millimeters in height difference can make a difference. The other interesting thing is the inner sole. What sort of inner sole are you running in this shoe compared to the inner sole in this shoe? This inner sole might be 1 millimeter thicker than that one. Even the chamois in your shorts can be a millimeter and a half thicker in one pair of bibs than another pair. So interesting facts to keep in mind about your height variations there. The second least likely measurement to change is your length. If your length is shortened by having your seat too far forward, you'll find yourself stomping on the pedals rather than a nice smooth pedaling action. A nice smooth pedaling action is pulling up, swiping back and kicking forward. Concentrate on those characteristics. Engage the quads and the hamstrings according to your physiology. If you increase the length by having your seat too far back, you'll likely experience neck and shoulder fatigue from loading the frontal area, too much weight on your hands. A classic indicator is pins and needles or numbness in your hands. Now, when you go for your test ride and you want to adjust the fore and after on your seat a little bit, hopefully you've got a little scale on the rail. See that there? So note where the seat clamp is on the number system here on that little scale. Then undo the bolt a little bit, push your seat forward or back, whichever way you want to, according to the measurement there, and then tighten it back up, and then you can go from there. So keep an eye on where your seat clamp is on the scale. The other thing is try and aim for keeping your seat clamp in the centre of your rails. If you happen to go forward or back a little bit, of course that's fine, but too far forward or too far back is not really considered any good for the seat either. And lastly, the saddle tilt, and this is the fiddly one, and it also is the major determining factor in the comfort of your seat. All you need to keep in mind is when you're riding, if you feel pain, tilt the seat away from that pain. So if you've got some discomfort on the nose area, but your back sit bone area feels okay, then tilt the nose down a little bit, which means it'll bring you back up, and it will spread your weight a bit more over the saddle, a bit more evenly. So it'll be less pressure on the front and a little bit more at the back. And vice versa, if you're feeling your sit bones and nothing on the nose, then tilt your seat back a bit, so nose up and the back down. Less weight on your sit bones and more on the front nose area. When you adjust your saddle tilt, adjust it by small increments, like even just 1 millimeter, even 0.5 millimeter. So for me personally, I go for 1 millimeter. If I feel a bit of discomfort on the nose, I'll put the nose down 1 millimeter. And if I feel, oh, okay, it's a bit much pressure on the back, then I have to bring the nose back up 0.5 millimeter. You're sort of honing in on the ideal spot. Does that make sense? Now, if you're going to put a new seat on and it happens to be a wavy seat, yep, a wavy seat, which means it's up at the back more, like it's got a tail on it, and the nose tends to go down. That means when you put a flat rule across it, say like that, then there's more light underneath there between the body of the saddle and the ruler there, because the tail flicks up, holds it higher. Whereas a flatter seat like this one here, you can see there's virtually no light in between there. So flatter seats are easier to measure your tilt, whereas your wavy seats are not so much. So you might need to go for a few extra rides to get it right. So what you could do is when you measure the tilt on your wavy saddle with the flat bar, instead of starting at the tail, start at the sit bone instead and across the nose like that. So you ignore the tail of the seat altogether and make your measurements there. Now when you're riding, if you find yourself gravitating toward the front, in other words, rather than hold onto the whole hood, the whole body of the hood, you tend to hold back at the transition zone between your bar and the hood, just that little bit back. That'll give you another 2 centimeters, even 3 centimeters back. That indicates that maybe your length is too long. So that could mean that you need to change your head stem. If you get a shorter stem, that'll bring the hoods back and you'll be able to sit on the hoods more comfortably. If that's the case, and if it's possible with the shape of your seat post, if you can get a 0 offset seat post rather than a layback one, means the clamp is directly in line with the seat post angle there, and that'll shorten your length. That might help you as well. Now, if with the new seat, no matter what adjustments you're making, if you just can't get comfortable on it, maybe it's time to move on to another seat. Maybe you have a friend who can get comfortable on this one. So here's some more 3D printed seats that I got sent to review. 2 of them, these 2 are from Superteam. That's right, Superteam Wheels Company also do 3D printed seats. And this one is from a company I haven't heard from before, Samassi. Now this Superteam seat is the cheaper one, and you can feel as soon as you put your thumb in that this foam is soft. However, you push it in far enough and it immediately comes to the shell, the hard carbon shell underneath. So not much pressure and bang, you hit the carbon shell. Whereas this one, their more expensive model, it's firmer on the initial touch. However, if harder you push, you can only just make it to the carbon shell underneath. So it's a lot firmer, which is good. The cheaper one has an open perineum relief hole. The more expensive one also has the hole cut out underneath. However, it's covered with the 3D printed mesh there. The cheaper one, if you put it back to back here properly, is shorter by about 2 centimeters, and it's also lighter than the more expensive one. Now, the Samassi, when we put our fingers on it, it's very firm. It's almost like a leather seat where it's quite firm, and the harder you push it, it's very consistent. Very nice. All over. Yep, very nice. Now the holes in the saddle are smaller, a lot smaller than the Superteam ones or than the general 3D printed seats that we see around. These are more like perforations. The perineum relief is sort of toward the backish here, but it also extends to the front, and it's covered with mesh, and it's very, very soft. The other thing is when I move the rails, try and push them in, it's very, very strong. Get the Superteam one and they move quite easily. Even do it with one hand. So I would say the rail to shell connection, or just generally, is not as strong as this one. Also, the thickness of this shell is thicker than the Superteam ones. Superteam ones look nice because they're shiny, but who looks underneath the saddle? So I would say this one here is going to be stronger all around and probably more comfortable. There's a lot more gone into the design of this seat. However, it is more expensive. And this one, the Samassi, is called the R7. Anyhow, one way to find out if it's comfortable or not is to put it on the bike. So let's do that. So now we've got all the measurements. Let's take off the old seat. We're going to try out the Samassi first. So we should be able to get this pretty much bang on to the right position. So we've got the old 7x7s, so we need to put on the new 7x9s. Because the old seat is a steel rail, and we've got the carbon fibre 7x9. Don't tighten the seat clamp up to 5 to 6 Newton meters as yet. Leave it at about 2 Newton meters so that it stays where it is, but if you need to bump it, tap it, then it will still move a little bit. Putting on my 111mm sit bone width template, make sure it's central, and mark the sit bone dots just before the widest part of the seat. So we use the good old tape measure just to show you don't need any fancy tools. So now it doesn't matter whether you start with the length or the height, whichever you want to start with, you probably end up altering both anyhow. Don't forget to put the rubber band or something around your front wheel here to keep the handlebars straight. So measure from the sit bone point to the handlebar, centre of the handlebar, and I need 745. It's 750, so half a centimetre forward. Bang on 745. Now, because the old seat from the rail to the top is 10 millimeters higher than the Samassi, Samassi's lower, so we've got to bring the seat post up 10 mil. You can start your tape measure at the dot, measure to there, or you can start your tape measure down at the bottom bracket spindle and measure to there, whichever way you find easy to eyeball the number. Okay, I've got it exactly right, 775. Good, so the height's perfect now, and we'll just go back to the length again, because as you come up, the seat goes back a little bit because the seat tube's on an angle. So I'll just make sure that's exactly right again. If I pushed it forward a fraction, we want 745, so perfect. So now I just need to do the tilt. Again, no fancy tools, we'll just use a steel rod straight across the seat, slightly at an angle. Can already tell we want 130, and it's a little bit too low, so the nose has got to come up. Just need to tap it, and it brings it up. Small movement here reflects a big movement up here. In fact, it's 4 times. So if you move the seat 1 mil up on the nose, it'll actually be 4 millimeters at the handlebars. That's why it's very accurate getting the tilt from your handlebar measurement. So we want 130, just over 120, and just needs a slight little tap. Slightly over, you go down again. Perfect. Okay, so everything's perfect. Now what I advise you to do is measure it again. I've just done that in between video taking. So everything's right. The height, the length and the tilt is absolutely perfect. Now sometimes when you go to do the clamp up, sometimes it will move the clamp a fraction and it will alter your tilt or your height or your length. So make sure when you do your clamps up, nothing moves. You should be right with the seat one. This is just like clamps a seat pole, that's no problem. This seat clamp I find very stable, easy to adjust and strong. However, it doesn't look the best. It's a little bit on the ugly side, but that's okay. Small price to pay. 6 Newton meters, that's fine. There we go, that's fine. Just give that a bit of a clean before we put the cover back on. Good thing you can do is silicone around your seat post here, especially if you've got ones like this at the frame joint and the seat post joint there. Just a bead of guttering silicone, and that'll seal it against any water. Even though it's got the cap's not 100% waterproof. So that's a little hint there. Put that back on, looks nice. So there you go, that's how simple it is, all ready for tomorrow's ride. Now usually it'll take only 1 or 2 rides, but sometimes up to 5 rides before you get your seat in the right position. It takes a lot of miles to feel if it's comfortable or not. Don't forget to take an Allen key with you when you go on the road. If you're riding with the bunch, don't stop the bunch every time you want to adjust your seat. Wait for everybody else to want to stop somewhere and then adjust your seat. If you're riding solo, that's fine, you can stop whenever you want. For your fore and aft, you've got that scale on the saddle rails there, that'll help you. Just look at it really carefully and just move your seat little bits at a time. Don't undo the saddle bolt too much, otherwise your seat will end up flapping around and you'll lose the exact tilt. You only want to undo it enough just so that your seat just slightly moves when you tap it, and then you can move it by small increments. Flat rides are the best to test out a saddle because you're in your saddle most of the time. With a hill climbing, you're off your saddle, on your saddle, off your saddle, on your saddle, and so it gives you a bit of relief on the way, so not so much of a test. However, it's still good to do that because when you get up and back and that, you're in different positions slightly and you sort of waddle around a bit till you get in the right position again. So do both flats and hills. You can also test on a trainer like I'm doing here. However, you probably need to sit for about an hour on your trainer at least to get a decent feel for your seat. When you get off, adjust it a bit. And it's not the same as on the road. The road's the best. When you're hill climbing too, your bike's on a different angle, and so the gravity pulls on your body a little bit differently as well. So that'll put you in a little slightly different position on your seat. So you might feel comfortable on the flat riding, and as soon as you climb a hill, oh, something's feeling a bit funny here. So you might need to adjust a little bit so you get the happy medium with both. And test out on different positions. Here I've got my hands on the tops here. I'll put them close to the stem. I like it like that, even when I'm hill climbing quite often. But of course, a lot of the time you're going to be on the hoods. So test out on your hoods as well. You lean a little bit more forward, your tilt's a bit different. And also on the drops, when you ride on the drops down here, although you probably won't be spending a lot of time on the drops, depending on what sort of riding you're doing. If you're racing, you might. And so you'll need to test out, see if it's comfortable on your drops, your hoods, and of course, when you ride up like this. So spend a lot of time getting to know that saddle so that you know if you keep it or not. Because when you keep it, you're going to keep it on your bike for a long time. So make sure it's right for you. Well, I did 3 rides now on the Samassi, and the last 2 rides, one was 86, 102. The 86k ride, I only just started to feel it toward the end, but the 100k ride, no, I could definitely feel it toward the end, and no, not good enough. So no good for 100k rides for me. Up to 80 is all right for the Samassi. Pity, I was hoping it would fit perfectly, but it doesn't quite. So it doesn't mean it's no good for you, it's just no good for me. I'm a fussy bum. So now, well, let's go and try the Superteam one, the better of the Superteam ones. So how do we get the new seat in the same position as the old? You've now got your measurements. So again, you can use a tape measure and a straight rod. I prefer the dedicated tools because they're quicker to use and don't rely on eyeballing to get the exact angle to read the correct measurement. Well, 35 k's into the ride and I did quite a few adjustments. Couldn't get comfortable on this saddle at all. I actually did 70 k's all up and I couldn't wait to get off the saddle. So unfortunately for that one is not comfortable for me. The other saddle left to test at the moment is the other Superteam one, the cheaper one, and I'm not going to try that because I know it won't be comfortable. Soft padding goes straight to the carbon fibre. Probably good for a lightweight rider like 65 kilos or under, but not for me. So going back to my old seat, well, it's 150 grams heavier than that one too, but the price you pay for comfort, comfort trumps everything. So I guess you could say it's the first successful, unsuccessful video. Successful video with an unsuccessful outcome. Unsuccessful video with a successful outcome. Successful video with an unsuccessful outcome. Unsuccessful video. It's a successful video with a successful outcome. You know, I've got to go back to the old heavy seat. So the old saddle goes back on using the same height, length and tilt measurements. So there you go, use your 3 measurements to set up your saddle so it's most comfortable for you. And also when you're selecting a brand new saddle, when you swap them over, you can set up your new saddle and see if they're comfortable for you. And don't expect every new saddle, even the 3D ones, to fit you perfectly just because it's a 3D or it's an expensive saddle. However, once you do find one that fits you, it's a keeper. And of course, you can use those 3 measurements to copy and paste from one bike to another. So don't throw away your measurements, keep them somewhere safe. Just quickly as a matter of interest, I'll show you the saddles that I've found most comfortable in the last 10 years. And don't be shocked, because none of them are really expensive seats. First one is this one. It's an imitation Pro logo. It's not real. Imitation cost me $12 on AliExpress. Very, very comfortable. Love that one. That's on the Trifox. Then on the Yolia, I've got this one here. It's a Vader. Very, very nice. I love that one too. But you see, the shapes are very, very similar. This one here on the Canyon, I've got Base Camp. Very comfortably. All these saddles I can do over 100 k's easy on. And the last one, oh, that's another Vader. That's on the gravel bike. Quite soft. So there you go, isn't it amazing? Even the cheapest of seats can be the most comfortable.
I would have got that straight away if I didn't land on my head for 20 minutes.
We're blaming on that.
And another French cake. Thank you so much. Now, is everyone looked after?
Thank you so much.
It's all about the cakes here.